Mental health issues are something I've been contending with pretty much my entire life, certainly since late childhood. And so it goes without saying, I've built up quite a substantial repertoire of skills and techniques and strategies just to enable me to get this far, to survive each and every day. And a lot of those skills and tools would be very commonly recognized and known. Things like having a contemplative and introspective practice, going to therapy, ensuring that I look after myself from a physiological perspective, that I have adequate sleep, hydration, nutrition, that I'm getting some exercise, that I'm connecting with people who reflect what it is that I want to achieve in my life and who appreciate me for who I am, and that I seek out meaning, that I seek out what makes me feel fulfilled, what gives me a sense of overall life satisfaction. However, that being said, there has been some key understandings that I have come to also, which have been extremely beneficial to me on my particular journey. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about those. And I suppose the first one is that you're going to have up and down days for the rest of your life. I used to think that there was this utopian place that I could reach where I would never struggle again. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. I mean, we're always going to have our blah days, the days where we just don't want to get out of bed and everything feels heavy and everything feels scary. And I suppose it's recognizing that on those days, if you can just try not to extrapolate the feeling that you're experiencing onto your entire life, if you can recognize the impermanence of any experience, then you can keep pushing one foot in front of the other. You can also forgive yourself for having a bad day, because oftentimes when we're feeling bad, we make ourselves feel worse by berating ourselves for feeling like this. And I suppose that's so counterproductive. So it's recognizing that some days all you have is the faith and hope for a better tomorrow, and that it takes every bit of strength you can muster just to take it one breath at a time, one step at a time, one day at a time, and having a bit of patience with yourself, having a bit of tolerance with yourself, and a bit of compassion for yourself on those days. Because again, sometimes we can see our failures and our setbacks as game over, and the reality is, in any healing journey, you'll have two steps forward and one step back, and it's understanding that that is normal, that's part of the process, and it's very much part of the human condition. Another extremely beneficial area for me has been shadow work. I think as I moved through initial stages of healing, I felt like all I could portray were positive traits. You know, I had been miserable and unhappy for so long, and all of a sudden I got a glimpse of positivity, and naturally enough, you know, I got very positive reactions from people when I was in that brighter place, and consequently I became convinced that I had to stay in that place and that I couldn't convey negative emotions. And yet again, they're part and parcel of the human experience. I mean, we all have at any given time the lightest of the light and the darkest of the dark inside of us. And when we can integrate all of those parts compassionately, then we'll find a greater sense of equanimity and a greater sense of acceptance for the self. Another, I think, area that took a long time for me to reach was recognizing that I was never going to get rid of my triggers or my anxiety. And again, this was something that I was convinced I could actually acquire, you know, where nothing bothered me. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. You just get better at dealing with them. I mean, triggers are triggers. You're always going to have certain responses to certain things. Likewise, anxiety is part and parcel of being human. You're not going to get rid of it completely. And I suppose when we can accept that, we can learn to tolerate our triggers and recognize them with the compassion and the forgiveness that they deserve, and make discerning choices as to whether or not we we need to work through them or whether or not we need to remove ourselves from the situation. Likewise with our anxiety. I mean, anxiety is necessary for us to get through life. We need to experience fear. However, we don't need to live in fear and we don't need to live in anxiety. And it's all about developing the wisdom to know the difference between what you have to accept and what you have to learn to regulate yourself through, and what you have to change when you have to change your circumstances or your relationships when you're in a place that no longer serves you. And that's not always an easy choice. And I mean, oftentimes, recovery and healing is just about making one good decision at a time. We tend to get overwhelmed and assume that we're going to fix everything at once, and that's just not the case. So if you can look at each and every decision and try to choose the healthiest and the kindest and I suppose the most forgiving and compassionate choice in any given moment, then you're going in the right direction. Living with intention and living with attention. We tend to be very much on autopilot, and yet when we bring ourselves into the present, when we try to practice mindfulness as frequently as possible, then the likelihood is we will make better choices. We also have to understand and come to the realization that other people don't really think about us as much as we like to think they do, and so much of life is not personal, and yet we assume it is. And the more we can detach ourselves from that, the more we can reduce the starring role that we give ourselves in everybody else's brain, the more likely we are to not suffer as much when people hurt us inadvertently, or not assume that they're out to get us. Because again, when we're struggling with our mental health, we feel like everything is about us, and it's about moving out of that very egocentric place and recognizing that everyone has their own shit going on, everyone has their own troubles, and the most you can do, or the best you can do, is to try to be kind to yourself with your own struggles, but also try to be kind to other people and give them the benefit of the doubt. Also look at your expectations. I mean, oftentimes these are one of our greatest sources of pain and disappointment and anger and resentment. Expectations for ourselves, expectations for our lives, and expectations for other people. And bear in mind, you are writing the script. You are creating all of these expectations and then getting pissed off with other people when they don't live up to them. So be very mindful of the constructs and the stories that you have in your mind at any given time. That being said, try not to judge your thoughts. Try not to judge your emotions. Recognize that you are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. They just are transient things that are passing through your mind and body. And the more we can tolerate them but recognize that they're just a creation, the more likely we are to be able to move through them with compassion. Learning how to emotionally regulate is essential to your overall quality of life. Being able to sit with somatically in your body that really strong negative emotions is so important, because otherwise we're going to be completely overwhelmed and swamped by any bit of negativity in our life. And also recognizing that there's a thin line between allowing our emotions and wallowing in them, and there's a middle ground there. I mean, most of us tend to oscillate between suppressing our emotions, completely ignoring them, or wallowing in them and being very much in a place of self-pity. And it's about being, in that middle space, that little sweet spot where you recognize them, you honor them, you're kind to yourself, you're compassionate to yourself, and you transcend and you move through them, And then recognizing that there's no quick fix. I mean, all of these skills, they're all very fine and well to talk about. Yet when it comes to pushing them into practice, they can be extremely challenging. And it's, forgiving yourself for fucking up along the way, because you're going to have setbacks and you're going to find it challenging. However, that's part and parcel of the journey, and it's always going to be our biological predisposition to go towards the negative and want to try and avoid our negative emotions. And it's training ourselves to sit with them and take the messages that they have for us on board and try to do better the next time. And again, accountability is huge. Just taking accountability for your life, taking accountability for who you are and the way in which you impact on other people. Because no matter how much we have going on for ourselves, we need to consider others. We need to try and come out of our own like particular situation and try and be as kind to others as possible, because again, that has been something that has been a game changer for me, just trying to be nice to others. I hope this is helpful and I have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.